Thank you for joining us this morning and on this session. My name is Martin Lyons. I'm a farmer in Cambridgeshire and also the UK chair for the Nature Friendly Farming Network. This session is around farming and community advice and support for our climate and nature recovery. We know many farmers, land managers, communities are wanting to engage in taking action for their climate and nature recovery. And it's about how can we bring this together and the advice and support so we get best value for money and get the best and the quickest actions happen across our landscape. So we've got a number of speakers lined up for this morning. We'll run through them. They've got some slides to present to you, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers. If you can remember to put your welcomes in the chat and all questions in the Q&A, please. We'll only be answering those questions from the Q&A box so we can help smoothly run through those questions. So first, we're going to welcome Jenny from FWAG, and she'll just go through around the shared vision. Next, we're going to got Matt, how to inspire and enable to get this going. And then we're going to move on to a double act of Teresa from Base and Tess from Rural Link. And they're going to go through the tools and how we can move through an accreditation system and how we can get advisors so we know who we can engage in. And then Alex with his Geospatial and run through how it looks on the ground. Dan with the local action, and then we're back to Jenny around the College of Rural Farming. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Jenny and let her start, and she'll give you further introduction of a bit more of herself. So thank you, Jenny.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks ever so much for all of the speakers coming today and for Martin to chairing. Can I have the next slide, please, Martin? Thank you. As we know, I think it's pretty much very well known now that we are in a climate emergency and a biodiversity crisis, and we have to act now. And what we're going to try and share with you this morning is a structure around which we feel that farmers and communities can really be enabled to play their part. And we want to be able to show to all the different organisations, and particularly governance, about how we can do this by changing our food systems and by enabling us to have a system where we integrate actions together and enable rural communities and farmers to deliver things on the ground with urgency. Thank you, Martin. So I wanted to highlight primarily the risk assessment, the climate change risk assessment that was done by our climate change committee that was launched last September. And I do want to dwell on these points because it sets the framework for what we actually need to do. If you read the report, it sets out in the chapter 3 about land use, and that the land use decisions that we make for all 61 climate risks that I've identified, there are 54 with high urgency scores that need to be addressed. And this is not something we can do piecemeal over the next 5-10 years. We need to act now. What it identified is that land use change is slow and major transformation is required. And to do that, we need to be coordinated and work together. We need to understand a better position. We need an environmental baseline, and that's something that we've been working on in partnership with lots of different organisations such as Ordnance Survey and now through our county-based case study. Because without an environmental baseline, without mapping and the state of the environment, we can't invest to create that understanding of how we can create a better environment for natural capital recovery. And we need something, and this is all coming from the report, actually sort of music to our ears, that we need a systems approach, because we've been saying this nearly 15 years now, and that we have to be able to integrate across all government policy and adaptation so that we can actually start to make sure that we link socio-economic and human activity in a way that is structured around the development of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So the report sets out what we need, and we need to get on with it. Next slide, please, Martin. So what we've learned from lots of brilliant people who are doing absolutely extraordinary things is that we can grow food with the recovery of our natural environment. We don't need to, as it says here from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we don't need to bend nature to produce food. We can actually grow food with our ecosystems. I do look at the Ellen MacArthur report, and there's obviously also brilliant reports out from people like the Land Workers Alliance, the Soil Association, and obviously our National Food Strategy. And I think this is a key message that still seems to be missed, is that actually food can be grown from these landscapes, and we need to relocalize that, and we need to be able to make people food secure as part of our ambition. Thank you, Martin. So in Gloucestershire, Matt's going to be talking to us from the Gloucestershire Local Nature Partnership about a county-based case study that we've been working on. And it's around the brilliant work that's been done through the Local Nature Partnership and how the Nature Recovery Network, which will precede our local nature recovery strategy, has started to create that environmental baseline from which we can understand ecosystem function. And that how we can create, and what we want to show you today, is how the ambition is to be able to show a structure that each community and groups of farmers working with those communities can actually become investment ready for blended finance. And Matt will outline that in his presentation. So I hope that will be useful to you to show you what we're working on there. Next, thank you, please, Martin. And I think the key thing that we want to do within this whole process around county-based delivery is to be able to put food at the heart of that. One of my biggest concerns at the moment is that there is a growing divide in our society around people who can access local quality healthy food, or who can afford it, or who can even learn how to cook it or know how to cook it. And there's a growing dependency on food banks and people in crisis and food poverty, and also fuel poverty. And we think that by being able to aggregate our support and advice across our county and through our catchments, that we can create a template where people can actually not only become much more resilient, but it can become a much fairer society. And we're delighted that in Gloucestershire that we've got support from the brilliant work of Tess and Harry Beck initially, and others, through our local enterprise partnership, the development of our Gloucestershire food and farming strategy, which is leading food as part of the transformation that we need to make to deliver all those other public goods of flooding and carbon capture and climate emergency and water quality and biodiversity recovery. Thank you, Martin. So as I've been going on about for many years, you're probably all fed up with me talking about it, but you know, from those of us who are deliverers on the ground, we know that, you know, every community and every farm, that there are multiple different stakeholders and players who have an interest in that spatial area. There are multiple different strategies, and it's very complicated for people, and people have got sort of so overwhelmed with the complexity of governance that they don't know how to act. And what we've been suggesting for a very long time is that there's an opportunity to relocalize and actually enable all that to come together and be invested in, both partners working in support and enabling local communities to lead on the protection of their local environment. And we can demonstrate for over 15 years now how well that works, and how you can actually, a facilitator or an advisor can actually help to enable people to understand the power of the location in which they work and how they can bring together all of those opportunities for their own resilience. Thank you, Martin. So some of the things that we're going to be working on going forward now is about green neighbourhood planning. So we want to be able to show how mapping the landscape, feeding into that county basin district and catchment and natural capital assessments, we can actually get communities and farmers to be able to give us a real-time assessment of the landscape using UK habitat classification, from which we can actually attribute ecosystem service. We can actually enable the people that live in a locality to identify all the issues and opportunities, areas of vulnerability, start to build resilience, particularly for food with local growing areas, potentially local fuel supplies as well. So we might be looking at hydrogen production, all those different things, and actually start to look at how we can integrate, you know, the growing population within an ecosystem that actually makes us resilient and makes us sort of less vulnerable to food insecurity, to flooding, and actually enables us to act, and how we can feel less anxious about climate emergency by taking local action, but in that wider county, regional, national and global context. Thank you, Martin. So to do that, we need advice and support, and I think that this is the whole purpose of this session, and this is what Tess and Teresa are going to be talking about from BASIS and Rural Link. Is that in this advice space, you know, we really feel that there are lots of different organisations out there, and they've got lots of expertise, and you need an opportunity for those people to be valued for their expertise, but to actually help the farmers in understanding through particularly transition that they can actually create this environmental baseline, become investment ready, and to be able to map their land and look at that opportunity for co-investment, and actually creating a sustainability standard, and whether that's to the global farm metric, or or to the LEAF standard. We don't, the headings around which we're working are what farmers want to become better and more efficient and resilient to being able to transition their businesses. So to do that, we need a really strong support network of advisors that are skilled, and Tess and Teresa are going to talk to you about professional register and how we hope to do that. But the key thing for me is that people need help, and they need to have people who they can trust, that can facilitate that opportunity for them, that aren't trying to do anything other than support that farmer or those communities and just give them the time and space that they need. And those integrated advisors are what we urgently need to change to help us act on climate emergency, so we can release all the knowledge and expertise of the people on the ground and work as a team with all these other experts. Thank you, Martin. So what Alex is going to talk about from the Rivers Trust is he's going to talk about how we can potentially geospatially map all these advisors, and how we can end up being able to become much more accessible in our offer of help to to farmers and communities, but also as robust partnerships, how we actually have to geospatially cover whole areas. Our team in Gloucestershire, we're recruiting all the time, but it's far better, and we welcome working with all the other partners to say, well, if you're already working in that area and you have that expertise, then please do, you support the people. We don't need to compete with each other. We need to create a systems approach where we all work together to enable this urgency of action to take place. So Alex is going to talk to you about that and the launch of the Rivers Trust geospatial mapping of advice. Thank you, Martin. And then what we're really excited about is that now, through the work that we've been doing through our environmental land management scheme trials that we're moving to, is that we can now see a really robust way that farmers can come together, and groups of farmers across water bodies, to groups of parishes working together. And this image shows you every single field parcel within a water body, where farmers can actually see how their land fits within that area, how the water flows across it, how they can restore habitats, how they can restore their soil, how they can relocalize food production, how they can help plant trees, integrate agroforestry into the landscape, what infrastructure they need, what energy they could produce, and all of the things to actually enable small localized communities to work in the part of the world that they care about and that they know about, but in that wider context, feeding that data into the local authority and county-based natural capital assessment, so that we can become investable. And Dan from Lands Up is going to tell us about that. And what I've put on the right-hand side is, for us as advisors, when we go out, we always scope the land in that context. We will never go onto a farm without being able to see how that farm fits and all the multiple opportunities that can align for that farmer, and how they can actually come together to cooperate and enable that across the landscape for that co-investment. And that's what Dan's going to be talking about. Thank you, Martin. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about is that quite often people hear people say, oh, there's no investment ready projects, for multiple blended finance. And that's completely untrue in my view, is the fact that we have an opportunity, we have a structure to work along these water bodies. Particularly the reason why we need to manage water is because we need to obviously manage soil, and we need to manage, if we don't manage our water well, we don't manage our soil well, and vice versa. And we need to be able to look at the landscape in that locality and enable local action to take place all over the place at the same time. And working along water bodies works in a really good way for us to become investable. It enables us to look at how we can obviously release that social capital. That's people living on the land who have the care and culture of that countryside, at their heart, because they want to look after it because it's where they live. There's a huge opportunity, which Matt's also going to talk about, around biodiversity net gain, an investment from biodiversity net gain. We know there's investments in water companies, for water quality, and also for flooding, huge amounts of flooding funding around sort of natural processes for flooding, and obviously the carbon code. We know that there's a huge amount of opportunity for carbon investments, and how we facilitate this, and the role of the green finance institutes and green finance and funding, and the corporates and the supermarkets. And if we can create these investment ready projects, we can actually become investable, and we can help our farmers to help our communities deliver public goods and food, and we can become resilient to climate change, and we can all act, and we can all act now. So I'm really delighted to present to you all the friends that are on this webinar who are going to break down some of what I've talked about now as a setting out the vision. And I hope that if anybody's listening who'd like to join us in this journey and be part of the partnership, we're very welcome. Anything, and keep learning as to how we improve all the time. Thank you, Martin. So do get in touch if we can be of any help. Thank you.
And so much going on with the landscape, and how do we bring this together and get this action happening? And great presentation. Just to remind people, if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A and then use the chat for your chat and your welcomes. So next we're going to move on to welcome Matt and how to inspire and enable local action. So Matt, over to you.
Thanks very much, Martin. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. And great introduction to the work we're doing in Gloucestershire, Jen, as ever. Title on my title slide slightly different to the title on the thing, but we're talking about the same thing. So my name is Matt Whitney, and I'm the manager of Gloucestershire Local Nature Partnership. For those of you who don't know, local nature partnerships, or LNPs, operate at a county level with England-wide coverage. They were DEFRA's idea, but not funded by DEFRA, you'll be unsurprised to hear. They're funded by local partners, and due to that, they take slightly different shapes depending on which county you're in. But in Gloucestershire, we're funded by a wide range of different partners, have loads of people around the table, and it's a great place for making decisions and smoothing out challenges and obstacles in order to put nature at the heart of decision making for people, the economy, and for wildlife. So this isn't just nature for nature's sake. It's what can nature do to help other policy spheres and drivers, planning, transport, etc. But also, what can those policy spheres do to better integrate and enhance nature? So a two-way street, if you like. Title of my slide says spatial prioritisation. That just means what should we do, where, and why. And I'm going to hopefully show you that in Gloucestershire, in our case study, we have the evidence we need in order to decide what to do where. We've got the policy that requires it, and I'm going to go some way to showing you how we're going about delivering against that. So next slide, please, Martin. Just a slide to show you the wide range of partners. Most of these people are financial contributors to the LNP, they're or on the boards. We've got the statutory agencies there, and just to show that the weight of people around the table, it's all the main strategic decision makers in Gloucestershire are involved in this LNP, which is great. Next slide, please. So our context, obviously, as has been stated by both speakers so far and will be stated by everybody else, we've got the climate emergency, and by climate emergency I mean climate and ecological emergency. That's been declared by all of our local authorities in Gloucestershire, and we've got a two-tier system of governance. So they have to demonstrate action against or towards those declarations. Part of doing this, we've developed a Gloucestershire tree strategy. There's been a huge amount of noise about trees over the last couple of years. We wanted to make sure that that was done right, that it's the right tree in the right place for the right reason, and that when conversations are had about carbon, they don't just consider trees, and also that when conversations are had about trees, they don't just consider carbon. I think in Gloucestershire, we're lucky that there is a growing understanding that landowners are key to delivering environmental objectives. And that may sound obvious, but to many it's not. I think there's many councils across the country who think, well, what can we do? We can plant trees on our land, on council-owned land, and that'll solve the problem. Or we can let our roadside verges grow long, and that'll create bee corridors, and that's our bit done. But in Gloucestershire is an understanding that for almost anything we need to do from what we know from the evidence and from what we have to do for the policy, we're going to have to work really closely with farmers and landowners in order to deliver objectives that we either have to or want to deliver. And the final bullet is just to show how busy a space it is. I'm sure many other counties are the same. We've got 3 elms tests and trials, a couple of pilots as well, 2 Green Recovery Challenge Fund projects, funded project, and a Woodland Trust Fund. There's lots going on, basically. Next slide, please. Thanks. So you'll all know about the Environment Act. That brings with it quite a lot of new policy that local authorities and various different LNP partners have to deliver against, main one being the local nature recovery strategy. This strategy is going to be based on our nature recovery network, which is the mapping that we've done using UK HABs as a baseline. And I'll talk more about that on the next slide. Essentially, that strategy, it doesn't have any white space, but we are going to have to prioritise about where the biggest bang for buck in terms of action to deliver objectives can be. And that strategy will lay out those priorities. We've also got biodiversity net gain. I was a fascinating ORFC session yesterday with Guy from Riverford and Honor, formerly of SFT, talking about financialisation of nature and all the inherent complexities and difficulties with that. My point of view is that we are where we are. This is what we have. It's an important financial tool potentially for farmers and landowners, and it's an important tool for nature in order to make, maybe it's not the best thing, but it's what we've got. So, you know, we have that policy that many partners have to deliver against, and that will be encouraging action towards this. Got a local industrial strategy in Gloucestershire, which has got the ambition to be for Gloucestershire to be the greenest county in the UK. Local industrial strategy is a LEP, a local enterprise partnership strategy. And what it means is we've got this LEP, the economic growth people in the county are committed to supporting the development of a local carbon market. Same point as for BNG, it's a complex area with many differing opinions about whether it's the right thing to do, but we believe that by doing it locally and by integrating it with the biodiversity net gain and with the water money and all the other forms of finance that are available, by doing that locally against strategic objectives and combining the lot together, you're able to develop a more robust approach than paying $2 a ton of carbon to some faceless organization that invests in renewable energy in China to offset your carbon. You can actually deliver environmental benefits here close to where you are that will benefit your local communities, local society and the economy. So that's what we're trying to do. Next slide, please. The evidence. Jenny talked about, and Dan will talk more about, the kind of geospatial approach that we're trying to take. We're working with UK HAB, classifications of habitat type and attributing ecosystem service function to those habitats. We're able to show what is the situation, so what is the baseline for the environment in Gloucestershire, where are different ecosystem services being delivered at the moment and to what extent. So that's the baseline mapping. And we also have opportunity mapping, which shows where is the need for more ecosystem services where they're current, and that need isn't currently being met. So where can we change habitat type or land use or land management type in order to deliver those environmental benefits. And we've mapped this with no white space across the whole of Gloucestershire in a kind of top-down way, I suppose, using best available data. And Jenny's and other people's working with local communities to map their own land and work with local landowners to map their land feeds into this county-wide picture. So it's constantly being ground truthed and updated. And it's this that will form, to a large extent, the basis of investment priorities and knowing what needs to be done where. So the better up to date the data. And again, there's no white space, but we are going to have to make priority decisions here. So broadly, we know what could be done where to achieve the objectives all the different partners need and want to achieve. And only, if you've been following my presentation, well done. This is a complicated area, I think, and only with coordinated farm advice is any of this made possible. And then I think now this final slide, please, Martin, talking about delivery. So in Gloucestershire, we've got all these different forms of finance. We've got all these different priorities, objectives, strategy, and we've got the evidence. What we're trying to do is, or what we are doing is setting up the Gloucestershire Nature and Climate Fund. So this is a partnership project between the LNP, which is my organisation, Local Nature Partnership, and the LEP, the Local Enterprise Partnership, the Economic Growth People, to leverage multiple forms of finance and funding to deliver strategic objectives. That's a mouthful. What does that mean? Well, bullets on the top left, we know what needs to be done where to improve nature broadly. We have these new policy drivers which have brought new players to the table with the need to achieve these outcomes. You know, local authorities weren't so much getting involved in this space until the Environment Act has actually kind of forced them to in many cases. Everyone's interested in achieving their own individual outcome. So if you're funding flooding, you want the outcome to be flooding, but clearly the funding, if linked properly to the other objectives and with the other finance, you can do work that can deliver that objective and others. All of this is very complicated for the farmer. So we need to combine these outcomes and the funding with the land management plans of farmers, what farmers know they should and can and will do on the ground. We need to link it all together in order to deliver the action that we need to address these twin emergencies that we're up against. Hope that's as clear as mud for you all. That's what we're trying to do in Gloucestershire. Having all the partners around the table through the local nature partnership is a really great way of doing it, I think. And I think it's worth pointing out things like this Nature and Climate Fund, Natural Capital Investment Trust. They're being developed up and down the country at a county scale. We feel the county scale, or put in some areas the catchment scale or protected area scale, it is the right scale to do it at. It enables local control of it, and yeah, well, that's what we're trying to do. Thanks very much.
Lovely, and thanks very much, Matt. And it's really interesting to see how you bring in all those different aims and objectives for the different parties together. And as you just touched on there at the end, this one, you're in Gloucestershire, but the same actions need happening right across the UK. And how do we bring those together and bring partners of the local nature recovery and the advice and farmers? So we actually have collective action happening for the best value of, because coming down to it, it's about pounds and pence for a lot of it. It's about how do we collect that value and deliver it for the best outcomes and help farmers deliver the best outcomes in the best place for climate and nature. So thanks very much. So next we're going to move on to Teresa from Basis and Tess from Rural Link, and they're going to have a bit of a double act. So if I hand over to you, thank you.
Martin, and thank you. It's great to be here with everyone virtually today and as part of this session. And Tess and I are going to do a bit of a double act, like Martin said, and talk about progression towards having specialist advisors and facilitators and technical knowledge and skills in the sector to support the action that we've all been talking about. So if we go to the next slide, please, Martin. And I think this just to set the scene in terms of what we're thinking about, the need for advice. And we've all heard over the last few days and the years past and the years to come about the move and policy direction towards environmental and land management and public money for public goods. And I guess that sets the scene in terms of policy, but it's against a wider environmental background and environmental need to achieve net zero, to achieve the biodiversity recovery that's been talked about already. And for us, it's about supporting those farmers, the advisors, with the knowledge and the skills needed to be able to deliver those outcomes for climate and biodiversity. And so Tess and I are going to talk you through what training and advice looks like and what the evidence has said that works well. And then some of the new kind of innovations that we've got and some really exciting moves and steps forward for the industry that we've been working collaboratively. So I'm going to hand over to Tess for some of the evidence and the work that she's been doing, and then I'll be back in a minute.
Thank you, Teresa. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thanks, Martin. So I was invited to work with Rural Link on the Gloucestershire Regenerative Environment and Agriculture Transition project, a great project, where I was tasked to look at and develop the training for farm advisors, community facilitators and mentors. Now, Rural Link works with the military community and land-based sector to develop an accessible pathway to new career out on the land. For example, the image at the bottom right is taken from the Surf to Feed channel, where Brodie is currently telling us his story of moving from the army onto his first farm. So a qualified organisational psychologist with over 30 years experience in learning and development, I'm delighted to be working with Rural Link to conduct the training needs analysis and design the training for the advisors and facilitators and mentors. I think this is a fascinating area and I think it's really exciting times for the community. Next slide, please. Our aim as part of the great project is to deliver evidence-based accredited training that supports a recognised career progression for the farm advisor, community facilitator and mentor. Next slide, please. To achieve this, we've applied a systems approach to training, and as such, it's really important that we gather the right information from a wide range of relevant sources. The key to success is understanding exactly what the need is, and we've done this using a research approach that captures both quantitative and qualitative data, so through surveys, interviews, focus groups and literature reviews. By iteratively reviewing and evaluating the information, this has enabled us to design evidence-based training. Additionally, collaborating with others allows us to validate our findings. Analysis also includes the methods and media that we're going to use for delivery. This is to optimize the learning and enable training to be accessible to a wide target audience. This takes into account learning preferences and provides an opportunity for an innovative approach to the design. Throughout, we've been focused on the individual needs and what the sector requires. I'm keen to know what you think are the key knowledge, skills, behaviours and experience required for a good farm advisor, community facilitator and mentor. I'm aware a lot of others have been working in this sector and looking at this recently, and I'm grateful to Saeem for the work they've done on the Advisors Competency Framework. Next slide, please. For us, the end state is us achieving an output of effective learning. And I say learning in preference to training, as an interesting training programme does not necessarily result in learning being transferred to the workplace if it doesn't meet the following criteria. The training must be coherent. It must meet the needs of the individual, the organisation and the end user. Training must be current and reflect the direction provided by the policymakers. An understanding of the integrated local delivery framework enables advisors and facilitators to operate effectively at different levels and work within existing governance structures. Consistent. There are many different advisors with a range of specialisms, and whilst they offer different advice, quality and delivery should be still at the highest level possible, and the professional manner should be consistently high, irrespective of where the advisor has come from. The training that we've been looking at focuses on self-awareness and the professionalism to ensure that we can maintain this professionalism. Training must be credible. For it to be credible, it should be evidence-based and address a clearly identified need, which is what we've been trying to do. And finally, community of practice that we've heard about. Training should not end at the end of that training course. That learning should continue through CPD and building the community of practice. The community of practice enables sharing of knowledge, sharing of ideas and lessons identified. It supports collaboration and allows signposting to take place. Next slide, please. So this slide here is an example from the GREAT project. It demonstrates the progression for the regenerative agriculture advisor. If you look at the bottom, you can see we start with the assistant advisor. So at the bottom right, you can see that at the end of this training, we would expect the advisor to be able to define things, be able to discuss things. So it's a lower level of understanding. In conjunction with this, they will also be looking at their foundation specialism. So this is where, for this one, it will be the regenerative agricultural module that we're working with BASIS to look to develop. As the individual gains more experience in the field, we look to develop a deeper understanding by getting them to more evaluate and apply, and also produce their own action plan. So if you look at the third bit up on the right-hand side, you can see there that what we've focused on the training objectives there, building on the training objectives from the foundation course, so the numbers just progress up. Key here is training objective 4, develop an action plan for effective collaborative working practices. I don't think we can underestimate the importance of people skills when it comes to advisors establishing trust with their clients. And fundamental to enhancing those people skills is delivering greater self-awareness. So throughout, we've woven in the kind of the self-awareness and people skills. And where those are shared between the facilitators and the advisors, then this is where we might look to deliver that jointly to enable that community of practice that we spoke about earlier. If you look towards the top, and we're looking more then at the senior advisor, so an experienced advisor that is potentially taking on more of a leadership role, could be expected to mentor subordinates using coaching skills, but also being the expert, the technical specialism in their field. Then we need to ensure that we've enabled those skills that have been developed from the foundation level throughout their career to enable them to progress and develop that leadership aspect that we probably expect from a more experienced senior advisor. We've developed a similar learning framework for the community facilitators and the mentors. And what we want to do is combine those cohorts, as I've said, where possible. As I've said, the evidence-based training is absolutely key, and it's vital that we get this right. There's a lot of people that are interested in it. So how can you help us? I'm acutely aware that a lot of people ask you to complete the surveys, but if you do have 15 minutes, then please do take the time to complete our survey at the following link, or use the QR code that's there. Really interested to know what you think are those key fundamental knowledge, skills, behaviours and experience, and maybe even qualifications that are required for advisors. Also, please carry on the discussion at the Role of Advisors thread that Dan set up on the WOVA link on the Oxford Climate Conference site. That's it from me. My email's there, and I'm going to hand you back to Teresa now. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, Tess. And I think that really clearly lays out what the aspirations are and what many of us identify with the training that we do. And so we wanted to kind of move on and talk about the opportunities that there are in the industry already, and some of the new opportunities kind of coming when we think about training for in the environmental advice sector. So if we could move on, and if you could build the next slide, Martin, I think that might be easier. So when we're thinking about training opportunities, and we think about there's kind of three elements maybe in terms of what training direction you might take. And the first might be where your interest lies. So is it in soil, in water, in biodiversity, in carbon, in climate change, in any number of things? And if that's the case, you know, are you interested in a broad approach, or interested in the specialisms and beyond that? The second is thinking about learning preferences, and it kind of comes back to what Tess has just talked about, and having that coherent learning. Is that something that you like to do on the job, either with another advisor, with farmers, land managers, with your peers in the sector? Is it a formal training that you're interested in, or is it self-guided training and online? And I think that's something that will develop even more after the last couple of years than it was before. And then if you think about that, where's your level of expertise? And that might be different in different sectors. And if you're new to the sector, or if you're looking at developing your expertise in different areas. And I think if you can think about all three of those, that might then direct where the training is. And for us as kind of training providers, to think about how we can make sure there's an opportunity across these different areas to take part in training. So I noticed many of you on the call have been part of some of our earlier discussions as a network that Jenny and Martin have brought together across the industry. And Martin, if you go to the next slide, we've started to try and create a framework for people that are interested in environmental advice to look at if you're progressing through that ladder, through the matrix that Tess talked about, or the one that's been put together by the Back to the Brink partners, back from the Brink partners, how that might look like. And we've categorised it into these kind of different areas. The first possibly being something that's kind of the on-the-job side, the kind of continuous professional development. And there's organisations there that by no means is every organisation, but a selection of those that will be running. You might go to a morning with catchment sensitive farming and learn about soil management, or an afternoon with the Rivers Trust and learning about water quality. And there's that kind of on-the-job learning, continuous professional development that's there, available, open to all, and available right across the country. If you then try and formalise that a bit more, there are short courses run by many organisations on a whole range of different subjects. And then if you take that a slight step further, then there's the more formalised kind of courses. Maybe you sign up to an apprenticeship. There's the new professional agriculture and horticultural advisor one. Maybe do an accredited short course, and maybe that's something like a basis course. And then maybe you're going through university training, college, doing an undergraduate, postgraduate course. And so that then kind of formalises the training, and it could be something that we look to populate those with the different opportunities that are available across the country and with different institutions. And then above and beyond that, then there is opportunities for professional development. Might you join one of the professional bodies that are listed here, and ultimately look to become a chartered environmentalist. And so it's looking at what the training opportunities are and bringing that framework together and seeing how that all fits together. So next slide, Martin, please. So looking at that in terms of a basis point of view, and as many of you will be aware, for a number of years we've run all sorts of training courses that are accredited in a whole different range of areas. And it's something that we're looking at developing even further, and working with you in the industry is to provide that practical and technical training in specialist subjects. And that might be soil and water, that might be environmental land management. And we've got new schemes coming on, courses to support the SFI standards, and then more specialist areas to develop. But if, Martin, you can pop the next one on, that doesn't mean to say that there's actually those people skills that goes alongside it. And picking up from what Tess said, there's the practical and the technical training, and then there's the people skills that go alongside that as well. But yeah, next slide, Martin, please. So just to say that, you know, there's all those training operators, those training providers, and maybe think about what training you're interested in and what those opportunities are, either to deliver training with the audience that we have today, or to take part in that training, and who that might be and where that might be to get involved. And it's something that as a network we're interested in looking at and bringing together into a more coordinated fashion. The next slide, Martin, please. So I'm really pleased today, as part of this panel, to launch a new register. And Martin, next slide, please. It's something that DEFRA have recognised, and you as an industry have recognised, that there's a need to recognise environmental advisors that are going out on farm to deliver advice. There is going to be a need for advice at a land holding scale, and at the moment, there is an argument that DEFRA have put forward, and others, that farmers, land managers maybe don't know where to go to that advice or to find those specialists. Also, on other kind of calls that we've done as part of a network, these are kind of comments that have come up, that we want to deliver a network of consistent quality advice, and that if you're getting an advisor out on farm, that we want that foundation level, and that we can all aspire to that. That there's a level of professional development, and very importantly, and for me this is really important, and for those of you that are on the call, I think you'd recognise that we want the recognition of an environmental advice role in a similar way to other roles within the industry. And so the idea is to create a national database of advisors that are accredited, and that's market-led and market-driven. So next slide, Martin, please. So BASIS, working together with the industry, many of you that are on this call have had conversations with DEFRA and with others, are building on other registers that exist within the industry, and are creating a new one for environmental advisors. The idea is that it will be then that professional recognition, and hopefully everybody that's delivering advice within the industry is really proud to be a part of it, and it's something that will become more and more recognised. The idea is that there'll be a level of competence to join, but that might be through the qualification, possibly the Beta Conservation Management course, or another course, and we're just finalising the details. But certainly initially, and I very much recognise that many of you on this call have been delivering environmental advice for many years. And so in order to be able to get onto the register, there'll be an element of acquired rights at the beginning. If you can demonstrate you've been delivering environmental advice on countryside stewardship or ELS or HLS before, that you'll be able to get onto this register. And then there'll be an ongoing requirement for continuous professional development and training with those organisations, like there is across other places. And so what ultimately the aspiration is that we'll have a register which can be a directory, a go-to place to find advisors that's linked to specialisms, that's accredited and verified. And I think that for me it's a massive step forward within the industry. It's a really exciting place. It links with what Jenny was saying, it links with what Tess was saying, and hopefully to deliver the outcomes that Martin and your all aspirations are, and we can do that. So watch this space. Registration for that's going to be available from June. And there's more details to come in due course. And yeah, really excited to work with you all to do that going forwards. So I think, Martin, just to summarise, as Tess said, we want to deliver interactive, innovative learning solutions that cover both those technical and people skills that we all recognise is important. But there's courses available out there, both new and existing ones, that deliver that technical knowledge to achieve the ambitions that we have, and that we've got an accredited register of advisors that we can all work towards as an industry. So thank you very much. If you've got any questions, I'd be pleased to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa and Tess. That was really useful. And I think this is really key for the future of how do we help land managers, councils, and everyone else involved in the landscape to understand the skill set of that person who comes to give advice. Because do you want water quality, biodiversity, crop protection, and is that upskilling and having a directory of people to match your need to their skill set and get the right advice to get the best thing done. And I really look forward to this. Hopefully lots of people join your register and help drive this forward.
Thanks, Martin.
So next we move on to Alex and a geospatial framework and discuss around how that works. And Alex is from the Rivers Trust. So Alex, over to you, please.
Brilliant. Thank you, Martin. Morning all, and particular thanks to Jenny for sort of bringing this all together for everybody. Yeah, I'm just going to spend the next 10 minutes, probably hopefully less, just giving you a quick overview of the Geerah Agricultural Hub, which we are developing, which I hope will go some way to addressing some of the issues and themes that we picked up on this morning's call, particularly around integration, collaboration, alignment, bringing in cross-sector views, perspectives, and ultimately, how do we get kind of more integrated approach to funding the right money in the right places through the right partnerships. Just one word of correction, I am from the Rivers Trust, but this is something that we are doing for the catchment-based approach. So next slide, if we may, Martin. So what is the catchment-based approach? I'm sure many of you will be very familiar as to what CABA is, but just in case you aren't, CABA has been around probably for about 12, 15 years now. It stemmed from a DEFRA policy framework. It has led to the formation of 105, I think now, catchment partnerships across England. And these partnerships are effectively a coalition of the willing. Unlike local nature partnerships, they do actually receive some funding from the EA. And their role really is about how can we get more integrated local delivery at a catchment scale? And just picking up the theme around sort of water and some of the points that Jenny's made earlier, I personally believe that water is the currency of natural capital, is the one thing that really then does tend to bring a whole range of different sectors together with a kind of shared interest and focus. But that's what CABA is. Move on to the next slide, please, Martin. So I think a kind of recurrent theme, certainly on this morning's call and some of the other sessions I've managed to attend, is around there's a lot of really good stuff going on in land management and agriculture, and there has been lots of really good stuff for quite a long time, but an awful lot of that tends to happen in isolation. There's lots of duplication of effort, as Jenny's referred about, who offers advice where, what, you know, got lots of soil guides. I don't think we need any more soil guides. We've got to keep on rewriting them. But how do we bring all these different bits of information together in the context of place? Because, you know, we've got lots of lists, lots of websites, what have you. But actually, if you're a farmer or indeed an advisor or indeed a business looking to be able to signpost your advice, you know, it's very difficult to understand who's doing what where. So and actually, in recognition of this challenge and actually picking up the point that Jenny made at the outset about this is being driven by food, some through the support of WWF and Tesco's, and actually a number of the other food retailers and manufacturers involved in the Courtauld initiative, we identified this need to start to really understand who was offering advice where, what initiatives were going on where. So from a retailer perspective, they could signpost their supply chains to the best sources of practical advice on the ground. Equally, we could help DEFRA policy understand who's doing what where. We could help farmers to understand where there might be sources of finance that, you know, outside the norms. So we've decided to pull together what we call the Agricultural Advice Hub. It's still in its beta version, so we're still working on it. But ultimately, it's about how do we try and join up some of these dots. Next slide, please, Martin. So, and I'm just going to run through a few slides now to kind of give you an illustration of what it looks like. we're on a webinar. I didn't want to do a live demo because we know how those tend to go. So I've just got slides here today. The site is up and running, and I will circulate the link in chat, but it is still in beta. So some of the things are being developed. So, but please get involved, get online, have a play, have a look. If you are an advisor, you want to register, it's going to take a couple of days to do so at the moment, just because we've got a few technical gremlins we're ironing out. But anyway, so the hub is set up into 3 sections: connections, data and information, and guidance and best practice. And I'll run through each of those very quickly. So for next slide, please, Martin. So connections, we've all talked about advice and who's offering what advice where. So we've created this geospatial database that allows advisors of any description to go on, register the type of advice they offer, where they offer it, whether it's free, whether it has, you've got PI insurance, the nature of the advice, the specialisms, etc. And it's a quite simple registration process. You put your details on the map, you put your contact details, and then up it pops. And the ambition is, if we get all the advisors out there, all the different types of advisors starting to populate this map, we get a much better idea of who's doing what where. And as you can see on here, once you've clicked on that area, it comes up with the type of advice, and you can scroll across to see all the different types of advice in that area. Next slide, please, Martin. Again, similar concept with funding and initiatives. We know that there's the government schemes, but there's a whole raft of other things going on out there: water companies, NGOs, private businesses, etc. So again, how do we bring this information together to make it readily available both for advisors, farmers, catchment partnerships, local nature partnerships, all these other different sort of bodies that are out there who have a vested interest? So again, we created this database, simple to register, free to use for all, to go online, to start collecting this information and ultimately help drawing up the dots so we can facilitate the change we need to see. Next slide, please, Martin. So that's the connection section, which hopefully is relatively self-explanatory. We also have in here some various data and evidence tools, and these are bringing a lot of the CABA data, and CABA has got sort of 250 odd data sets from across all over the place, but it's bringing some highlighting or daylighting some of these data sets. So there's some tools in here that allow farmers advisors to get some of this contextual information. It's not about dictating what's going on where, it's just giving them information to make some informed decisions. So farm context, you can understand where the land is, what the upper catchment is, where the water drains from to the key water bodies, WFD status of those water bodies. Vulnerabilities and measures tool, you can actually start to plot where farm locations are, other locations are, and does some simple analysis that identifies key areas of opportunity or issue. And this is particularly important if you've got sort of a large supply chain and you want to start to understand where you might want to focus your efforts on, say, water quality over and above carbon. But ultimately, you get to those, ideally, you get to places where they have those mutually beneficial outcomes. And then we've got Data Explorer, which brings together some it's a really good tool. And I would suggest everyone has a play, because you'll be there for a very long time in terms of biodiversity data sets, flood risk data, low flow data. But it starts to give you a really good understanding of what's going on where and what are some of the issues and opportunities. And in turn, links that back to both the advice, but also the funding. So if we can get the funding data and initiatives populated, that will then identify opportunities for farmers the other end of the spectrum to tap into that money. Next slide, please, Martin. And then again, we've brought together, it's just a signposting, but bringing together various different sources of advice, information, guidance, and tools that we know through various sources, feedback from farmers, use by advisors, that can be really helpful. But again, rather than having it scattered to 4 corners, can we bring all this together in one place so we can signpost it out? And including case studies and demo farms. So again, I think the point I made about how do we create markets for farmers is really well. So if we can get the farmers, be it you're a facilitation group or cluster group, to start mapping your areas, then that ties back into a whole range of opportunities, not least the new sort of landscape scale recovery that came out from DEFRA yesterday. Next slide, please. And I think that's my last one. So as I say, this is primarily being driven by food industry, but we've had a number of other partners involved. And actually, I'm very pleased to say United Utilities have also signed up as a supporter as of last night. So we want to bring all the water companies, but we want to bring all sectors together. It's a free tool to use by all in order to join up the dots to drive this change we need to see on the ground. The link is there. I will put it in the chat. As I say, it's still in beta version, but please get involved, lean in, have a play, add your data. Many thanks.
Lovely, and thank you, Alex. And do add your questions into the Q&A and not into the chat. That'd be really helpful. We'll pick up the Q&As as many as we can at the end. But it's really interesting just to see how you're laying all that data on a map and how, as users, we can engage and see what's going on and see how we can engage. So next up, we've got Dan and local action and how data and mapping can support and facilitate groups of farmers to work together.
Great, thank you, Martin. And yeah, just to reiterate, thank you so much for joining, and thanks, Jenny, for organising this. We're now moving from the macro down into the micro. So what I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes talking about is how a tool, and I'm from the Land app, just one of many mapping tools that's trying to mobilise landowners and their advisors to start getting ready for natural capital markets. So it's really articulating a framework for coordinated action inspired by the integrated local delivery and using smart templates within geospatial world to get ready for this oncoming movement. Next slide, please, Martin. So the framework is relatively simple. What we're really trying to do is mobilize every single landowner in England and wider towards the international to work around this virtuous loop. And this virtuous loop is catalyzed by spatial data, and it's including advice, it's including planning. And fundamentally, it's made up of 4 components. The first thing is a baselining. Is what do you have? What exists within your 4 walls in terms of existing habitats, existing management, but also the quantification of that baseline. How much carbon stock do you have existing or biodiversity stock, etc. The next is the land management plan. What should you do based on your knowledge, your advisor's knowledge, the local and national strategy? What should you as an individual landowner do as your next step to become a resilient farming business, but also help deliver local action, national priorities? The next is collaboration. Who can you work with? That's in the sense of, can you work with your neighbours? If so, how? Can you work with local advisors? But also, who else can you collaborate on that wider setting? And I've got a slide to explain that a bit more. And then finally, it's all good and well having a land management plan, but what we're really trying to help facilitate is who will fund me. So some of the data, for example, the CABA group is generating is going to be really valuable in that step as well. And what happens if we get people going around this loop? If every farmer in the UK gets in a digital loop like this, we also get to derive the strategy and insight. We can derive, are we on target to meet the 25-year environment plan? Are we lacking? If so, where? And how can we prevent that? Next slide, please, Martin. So starting at the what do I have? Our tool, working with Jenny's team and Elms and wider partnerships, has now created an automatic workflow to give your farm holding a best guess baseline. So based on Ordnance Survey master map, based on Natural England's priority habitat, based on satellite imagery, etc., we can now automatically present to any farmer, any holding in England at the moment, trying to go wider, a best guess. And that's using, as the Gloucester Nature Partnership mentioned, UK Habitat as the framework and the language for that data to be returned. And that language is also the language that underpins the biodiversity metric. So every farmer can receive a copy of what we think's there, and our tool allows them to confirm and amend that with their advisors. And the 3 things that this really allows is accessibility. Everyone has access to this. We must say thanks to the Rural Payment Agency as well. They've done a lot about making that field parcel data accessible. But also it's the accuracy and insight that you get from that. By going into a digital realm, by drawing on a map, you don't only just get that visualization, you also get what we call metadata. You get the exact area, the exact location, which then can tie in, for example, with what Alex was just speaking about. And that insight you derive can be those ecosystem services that you're currently delivering. So for example, each habitat type and its associated condition management, you can start to derive the ecosystem service value from that proposition. And if you just go next slide, Martin. We're taking this one step further at the moment, and we're working with the Ordnance Survey's rapid prototyping team, which not only using existing data sets, we're also creating new data sets to enhance that baseline. And what we're using is from the rapid prototyping team, Earth observation data to create baseline maps based off that highly accurate and regularly updated visualization from space. So we can now start to produce, not just where that field parcel is, but where, as you can see on the map, where these individual trees are, where those scrub patches are dynamically creating and regenerating, etc. Next slide, please, Martin. Once you've got a baseline and you've found your local, advisory group, say your local FWAG, you get involved with a local group, you can start to derive your land management plan, your future vision for what your farm or your holding or your estate is going to do in the future. And very much the land app is just a tool for you to scenario plan. You can have multiple land management plans. It can be dynamic, but as you draw those, you can start to appraise the various options. This one might be better for my carbon values, but the other one might be better for my, sustainability into the future as the winds pick up, for example. So all we want to do is provide a simple, free to use tool for farmers to doodle up plans. But that tool has got the power to then share that data with, for example, prospective funders, which I'll come on to. But if there's any government agencies listening, and I hope there are, we can also at this point insert business rules. So one of the major blockers we've had with payments, for example, from the RPA is that it takes 6 months before you get computer says no. What a tool like the Land App can do is put business rules at the point of drawing. So if you do draw, for example, a woodland planting on a breeding wader habitat, instantly the Land App can say, have you considered that that isn't a priority habitat for breeding waders, and therefore reduce the admin time as we go through. So all we're really trying to do is open up those business rules for tools like ours to make it a lot more efficient for those application processes. And the final step is that this land management plan acts as a stock take of what you potentially can deliver and therefore be funded for. Just yesterday, the new local nature recovery and landscape restoration projects were announced. What they need is people to start logging where they can actually implement some of those habitat creations, habitat enhancements, etc., etc. What the Land App has done is it's created a template for exactly that. Next slide, please. And again, taking this one step further, we can use smart algorithms to predict what a good land management plan would be for your farm. So at the moment, we've partnered up with Wild East in Norfolk, and we're generating wild edges. So based on your existing hedgerows, existing watercourses, existing water bodies, we can predict where you should be putting in buffers, where you should be allowing scrub to enhance, where you should be protecting ancient woodlands. And that can be done at a click of a button. So people can now automatically receive a best guess land management plan for which you and your advisors can delete things you don't want or add things that you do want that aren't being currently iterated. And this is just us trying to speed up this process, because as we keep saying, we are in a climate emergency and we need action. Next step. And once you're in a digital space, we've now got the tech to allow that data to be shared really easily. So we are fully API integrated. Don't worry about the tech. But what that means is you can share a live copy of your farm's plan and farm's baseline with multiple recipients. You can have 100 people that receive a copy of that API, DEFRA, your facilitation fund, FWAG, your rural pavement agency. But if you make a change on the Land App, everyone receives an updated copy. No one is going to be left behind. We have one source of truth, and we therefore can mobilize quicker. What we can also do within this framework is as it's live data, you can invite accredited advisors, your grassland ecologist, your local infrastructure, your solar panel planners, all into that one map, and they're all working off the same plan. Therefore, we can be more cohesive rather than being caught in this paper cycle of spreadsheets and PDFs. And I'm a zoologist by training, and what we do also get from this is maximum ecological benefit. Cohesive plans, you can see where people's wildflower meadows are connecting or conversely not connecting, and therefore local facilitators can make sure that those plans become cohesive. Next step. And if we get this right, and again, I really want to excite DEFRA and the RPA in particular, but also the private markets, is that if every farmer gets a digital land management plan that not only works for them as a farm business, but also works in sight of local and national strategies, we can actually achieve all the different levels of payments, and spatial data underpins that. Your land management plan on the individual level is what the Sustainable Farm Incentive is trying to do. However, within that land management plan, if done right, you can put in a farmer group setting and it can contribute to the public local nature recovery and landscape restoration plans, but also private blended finance. We are talking to a lot of big corporates, but they aren't interested in 100 hectares. They're not interested in 1,000 hectares. They want to work with 20,000+ hectares. And the only way we're going to do this is if everyone starts mobilizing in a consistent templated format, using the rules of integrated local delivery, but really mobilizing at speed. And if you're a farmer, you can take ownership of this. Start drafting up geospatial plans on a mapping tool that's got a template, and the Land App is one of them, and I'd highly recommend it, but there are others, but we just need mobilization now. So just to really say, that's it for now. Thank you so much to all the partners. We've worked closely with DEFRA on lots of ailments trials led by FWAG and the Land Workers Alliance, etc. UK Hub obviously have created the language, which is bringing together all these parties. And I mentioned the Rural Pain Agency. You know, I think it's understated how much use their new portal has been for our development in particular. So that's it from me. Thanks, Martin. I think there's one more slide with my email address, but just to reiterate, Land Up is free for farmers to use. You can download your data, have a play, get involved with local groups, and hopefully we can start mobilizing and seeing action. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Dan. That's really interesting. And you touched on a really important point there around the land management plan. In the discussions many of us have been having with DEFRA in England to drive positive change forward, the discussion was around that land management plan being a key cornerstone of every business. We've seen that sort of wane and sort of almost disappear, but I think every single farmer needs to really look at their asset. And it is food very much important, but we're asset managers as farmers, and look at that, you know, a land management plan of where do we put what habitat, what's the best use of that resource in conjunction with that food production and the biodiversity, and make it all watch and join together. So that's really, really good. And we've got some key drivers coming through now with the Environmental Act around that biodiversity recovery, water quality and various things. So many of the speakers, it helps us put those targets on the ground. So thank you very much. So next we're moving back to Jenny and supporting the Royal College of Real Farming and Food Culture. So Jenny.
Oh, thank you. Just very quickly, and I appreciate everyone we've presented today to you a huge amount of information, but I do really want to put these two slides in, if I may, because it's the vision of Colin Tudge and Ruth West, who are obviously, as you know, behind the Oxford Real Farming Conference, and I'm very privileged to be involved in Colin's vision around the piloting over the next 2 years of the College for Real Farming and Food Culture. And the college is a virtual college, but it's effectively bringing together the opportunity for agroecological learning across the curriculum, across the education sector for universities and colleges. So can I just have the next slide, please, Martin? So just to sort of like try and sort of around the circle, so to speak, that we know that people coming through from the agriculture sector, environmental sector, young people are passionate about climate emergency. We need to involve more people in this amazing space, a transformative space around inspiring people and enabling people to take local action. And that the idea with this college is to actually learn between establishments, to develop agroecological modules, to look at how we can actually embed transforming the food system from the very start of post-school education, and even possibly take it into schools in the future ambition. But I just wanted to be able to put this in here because I know that Colin and Ruth are very passionate about this, and obviously the younger generations are the key to our future, and so standardizing those opportunities of actual learning when lots of different organizations are thinking about developing modules around agroecology. So if you're involved with any of the universities or colleges and this is a space that you might feel that you want to join, then please do get in touch. Ian Rappel is now leading on this for the trust, and obviously really interested to learn on other modules that have been developed from different colleges and courses. The Royal Agricultural University is very much involved in this space where I'm a guest lecturer, and Schumacher College and others are already in the conversation, so please do join that. And that's all from me for now for the questions, but thank you very much indeed for joining our session this morning. We'll wait for the questions. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Jenny. And yeah, thank you to you for driving a lot of this forward and bringing people together. It is such an important time to use the best resources we have and find the gaps, not recreating more stuff. And it's this, we can learn from each other. There's lots of amazing individuals and organizations and data out there. And it's how we can bring it together. Let me bring that back, and then we'll move on to the questions. So hopefully everyone's been filing them into the questions because I haven't been able to keep track of them while I was presenting. So we'll scoop up to the top. It's a question to Matt, but I think it goes across the board really. How do we assess the quality of the habitat mapped, and how do we know what is there already? So is there anyone wants to pick up on that one? Matt, do you want to start?
Yeah, for sure. So Thanks for that question. I put a link to the evidence base and the natural capital or ecosystem service mapping and the nature recovery network mapping in the chat, which I'll put in again in a second. All of that data is derived from habitat data, and the habitat data is collected from various different sources, some of which are kind of publicly available, some of which are the property, or I suppose, of individual parties, and all of which is being added to by habitat data that landowners have given permission to be included within our county-wide habitat map. That's through surveying work that the Wildlife Trust are doing, a citizen science type survey project, and also through natural capital mapping projects that Jenny, Dan and other people have been doing in the county. The specific question is, do we include quality data? At the moment, there is the ability within our county-wide map to include that. However, because of the massive lack of it, we haven't included it yet in the county-wide map. That might be different for Dan's work. He's probably got a slightly different answer to me, but for the county-wide map, within the methodology, we have the ability to include for it, but it's not currently included because of the lack of it. Hope that's a reasonable answer.
Lovely. Does anyone else want to add any points to that one?
I think just to add that I think, within this process, there's got to be a top down and bottom up. We're not trying to replace surveying. Surveying's super important, but what we are trying to do is do things at scale and speed. So I think what Matt's done is awesome from the top down, but what we now need is surveyors and the associated farmers that they're surveying to get condition assessments done, get soil recording done, to really give that overall picture, because at the moment just knowing a habitat's there isn't quite enough, although it's a really good start. What we need to know is, right, how much soil carbon do you have, what biodiversity do you have, and other more quantifiable micro level data as well.
And I think it's not waiting to be perfect. Let's capture what we can and get this moving. We haven't got time to wait until we get this just right and perfect. Let's go with what we've got and the data we have. The next question I think really links into that, and I think it's really sort of important. It's talking about frowning upon soil damage and other things and waiting for policy to catch up. Policy, a lot of what's coming isn't going to be delivered for 4 or 5 years, and then the action won't actually happen for another 2 or 3 years after that. Let's get this thing moving. Let's get empowering farmers, councils and others to take the steps they can do now, and then bring in the rest that's coming, and look at those private financing opportunities and other things and bring that in. So I think there's a real great opportunity. Is there anyone just wanted to, I don't think there's anything to add on that unless someone's desperate. I look for people to take off the mic on the panel. I'm just going to read through these as I'm going. Teresa, you mentioned you're busy updating the Foundation Awards content and make sure that you include more of the agroecological transition. Could you please give us a bit more details in terms of the timeline, please?
Yeah, so there's quite a few things coming on online, over the next little while. So I've been with BASIS 6 months, and we're just kind of bringing all the environmental stuff together. So we've got a new course, Principles of Sustainable Land Management, coming in the spring, that's going to link to the SFI standards, just be a little one-day kind of in-person or online course. Linked to that, then we're going to update the Beta Conservation Management course, do a kind of a big rewrite and revision of that, and that's been really popular. Our training providers have had loads of people recognising what we've all been talking about this morning, so we've recognised that needs to be updated. Alongside that, then we're looking at the Certificate of Crop Protection and our other courses to make sure that they're fit for purpose for training agronomists and advisors in the industry, linked to ELMS and environmental outcomes. So there's lots kind of happening, and there's a lot happening quite quickly because we all recognise that we need to do it now, and that's, yeah, we have moved quite quickly on a lot of these things in recognition of what Marta's just said, and other things will come going forward. So yeah, if there's anything kind of particular, just let me know and we can kind of do it, but yeah, watch this space because there's a lot happening in the next few months.
Jeremy's brought up an interesting point. The presentation is very much a mission-based. Yeah, we want to get on with this. We haven't got time to wait. And the urgency is bringing what we can together. And it says rather than client-focused. So to whom are these advisors be liable and accountable for? Does anyone want to sort of just bring up around that of who is liable, who are we aiming at?
that one, if that's okay. I think what we've been trying to do in this space is to try and create a sort of standard of advice that is actually, as I say, it gives us that accreditation. I remember when we first started with post-Brexit in 2016, the whole industry said is that it's long overdue to have a standard by which people give firm advice, because of the fact that it has so many wider implications. Bad advice has that. And that hasn't happened yet through policy. And actually, obviously, what we're trying to do here, I think, is to give that level of advice, because it give that level of standard. And I think that what Teresa's doing in setting out this professional register is the starting building block of that accountability. Because at the moment, you know, I know that when originally there was this idea that we should map advisors, there was a lot of concern about, well, if you map advisors, how do you know what advice they give, and is that of a good and high quality, and is it going to be the same as if they chose somebody else, you know? And I think that the whole architecture around what we're trying to do here is to build on the opportunities that have come from potentially the farm resilience program, to actually create a structure so that we can actually make sure that there is standardization to what we're all trying to achieve, to that vision, with quality, and obviously with professional indemnity insurance. And I think it was Jeremy from CAVA that asked this question. You know, when we go out and give advice to farmers, all of us, I think, we give our best advice of what is there at the time. What informs us on how we advise people is what we've learned, and as Tess says, that's a sequential thing of both training and experience. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that we as individuals are responsible for the organisations we represent, you know, for that advice that we give. So obviously, that's why I think that Alex was referring to the fact that, you know, it's important to have that indemnity insurance, to make sure that if you've given that advice in a snapshot of time, and it's particularly in this really dynamic landscape of change, it's very difficult for advisors to be on point as what is the best direction to take farmers in at any one moment. So I think the accountability is with the individual organisations and individuals, but I think if we become a strong, robust partnership that is working to that common framework, working to those standards, that enables us to slot in, you know, the whole structure around the farm resilience programme particularly, and it enables us to inspire and release the knowledge from people on the ground whose knowledge should very much be integrated into this delivery opportunity, then actually we could all become accountable. And I think that's the thing that we need to do. I don't know if that answers your question, Jeremy, but I don't think there's any one other accountable body other than the fact that we are training standards to which we learn, and the way that we protect ourselves from a very dynamic advice provisioning environment.
Yeah, thank you, Alex.
Just to add to that, you know, I think we need to recognise that there's a whole breadth of different types of advice that land managers want and need, and some of that will be, you know, require professional indemnity insurance and have liabilities. Others won't, and certainly through what we're trying to do with the Cabot Ag Hub is recognise it's a very broad church, but get everyone to register their details. But within that, we say how many years of experience, do you have PI, do you have qualifications? So it doesn't go as far as the work that Tess and Teresa are doing, and it will be brilliant when that comes online, because we can sort of align the two. But I think we do need to recognise that farm advice is a very broad church and covers a whole myriad of different things. And will increasingly cover more things as we move into this new kind of brave new world of sort of public ecosystem services.
I think the only thing I just want to add, building on Jenny's and Alex's comments, was that not so much in the accountability, but the mission focused and the client focused. Hopefully what I was trying to highlight in my presentation was the importance of the individual, and by the individual, I don't just mean the advisor, I actually mean the end user. So, you know, if it's the farmer, and there has to be that balance between the mission and the client. So hopefully that's what Teresa and I tried to capture.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any mics off? So the next one was from Georgie. Is there an opportunity to use citizen science biodiversity recording apps and other devices? So many of you are talking around that local action and putting it onto data sets. Who wants to kick off on that one? Alex.
It's a great question, and from a Cabot Ag Hub, not yet. But because it's Cabot data sets, and you know, Cabot is this sort of 200 data sets where we try to bring in the data and then make it freely available to all. the ambition, I know we've got the citizen science monitoring cooperative going online shortly. I think the ambition will start to be to bring that data in, so we can start to kind of collect the data in one source, but then republish it through other sources, if that makes sense. So clunky answer, apologies, but give us a bit of time.
Jenny.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, that's the whole point of this whole framework, is around enabling local action, and part of that the framework is recognizing that every community has so many different experts in it already that live within that community. In fact, part of the structure is that you're looking at a community through the parish delineation and through the electoral roll, and then you can access all the different expertise within that community, and nearly always there's somebody of everyone that you might need for a climate emergency project. So there'll be ecologists, there'll be hydrologists, there'll be everybody from just about every walk of life will live within your community. And I think the idea with this is that enabling that action to be released, to feel that people can actually volunteer and do things that are meaningful and collect data that's meaningful, could link into their green neighbourhood plans. Particularly species are what so often get lost in this, all this sort of stuff, where actual individual species are hanging on within communities is really vital information, and that we can record and have funding streams from different levels for people to be able to acknowledge. So I would suggest that there's lots of different levels for social science to feed into this process, and that this overarching ambition to get this sort of broader understanding of the quality of habitats and land use and land management, ecosystem attribution and relocalizing food production, species recording and water quality and things like that is absolutely essential, but it can come in that mechanism at that local delivery level.
And I really think it's really important how we engage citizens and public and engage them in coming out to the countryside and mapping and looking at what's going on. And that rewards and excites farmers, because they get, seeing good things happen. And it's about how do we collect that data and use it in a positive way. I'm just going to quickly run through. I'm conscious on time, so keep the answers short. River Trust, is that not what FWAG are doing?
Not really. Ours is a sort of, the map we're trying to do, it's a bit more of a macro scale. So it's the bigger blobs on the map that you can then link into. So hopefully Matt will be able to put his kind of local recovery nature partnership strategy on there. I know the Cornish County Council are wanting to do their own. So again, what we're aiming to do, and we'll learn by mistakes, to be honest, is to get the bigger blobs that you can then start to drill down to get that local detail. But I think at this stage, there's so many big blobs that we're just not joining up or aware of, that there are so many inefficiencies and opportunities being missed for everyone.
Lovely, thank you. And we'll move on to the Jenny. Sorry, do you want to just?
Oh, I was just going to say that that to me the only way we're going to achieve this is through collaboration and partnership working, and it needs to not be a competition. To me, I don't mind who achieves it, whether it's Wildlife Trust, Rivers Trust, RSPB, farmers themselves, communities. I really don't mind. It's a collaboration, and if people are doing good things, let's all celebrate it. Our view at FWAG is that we know we don't have enough advisors. We need more people in this sector. We want to work with other advisors, and we want to be able to make sure that if other people are doing good things, we'll keep learning how to do it from them and share. But we need to take the competition out of the NGO sector, and the government needs to support a framework where we can work together and stop wasting so much time competing for funding, and actually support us all to work together. Thank you.
And that competing on funding and a framework from government, many of us have been trying to push for that for several years now, and it's just not happening. And for many of us, I think feel the government or the DEFRA and government are going so slow. We need to make something happen, and then we can bring DEFRA into our space of this collective, giving them the tools that they don't seem to be wanting to deliver at a quick enough pace at the moment. The next question was, I think we'll remain at you, Teresa, around IPM. And if we're going to presume the agroecological approaches, and including the IPM pesticide reduction, how will advisors have the confidence backing of advice not to use chemicals?
Yeah, absolutely. And it links, I'm actually doing enough field scholarship at the moment about how we can increase the uptake of IPM. And that's definitely one of my first kind of conclusions, if you like, from some of the early conversations I've had about the need for training and skills and upskilling of advisors in that space. I think it's something that we're looking at particularly with our training of agronomists, in terms of where IPM comes in and the skills, and it comes back to Salim's point about training new agronomists and advisors, is being built into the ongoing CPD, and there's kind of updating courses and things that we've done as part of that. So I think it's moving everybody in that direction to have the confidence in terms of delivering that advice, and that comes from training right the way through to kind of ongoing professional development. So that is definitely what we're working towards. Brilliant,
thank you. I'm conscious we've answered most of the questions in the chat. Jenny, there's one, any chance of a new virtual college will offer for MOOCs? If you just pick that up from Caroline.
Sorry, could you say that again, Martin?
Jenny, any chance the new virtual college will offer MOOCs?
What's that?
Yeah.
What's that? What's MOOC? Could you spell it out? In the I'm afraid I don't know what that is.
It's in the Q&As. I'll let you pick it up with Caroline.
Thank you.
Free learning by the look of it. So.
Well, just to talk about the college. So as I say, I'm just very privileged to be invited to learn about it. And I think that the Colin and Ruth's ambition, as I say, is very much about trying to embed learning from the very beginning. I think that the architecture around that is going to be very much about us all putting forward what we think the industry needs for young people to transition right through to the more professional level, and to have a standardization of that. And I would imagine that yes, that there will be free learning within that, because of the fact that there is a lot of support from environmental trusts and others in this space. And I think one of the things I'd just like to say before we finish, I think we've got a few minutes, if you'll just allow me, Martin, is that I know we've presented a huge amount of complicated stuff this morning, and it all looks very structured and very and very complex. But actually, at a delivery level, you just need to look after the piece of the world that you are looking after with your local partners. You can find those partners really easily through the catchment-based approach. There are those partnerships are well established now over 10 years, as Alex said. You can create groups of farmers quite easily to a common template. There's people out there in communities and districts all starting to act, people wanting food security, people wanting a fairer society, and just don't worry too much about this overarching architecture if you find it too difficult, because in the sense that I think that's what prohibits people in thinking they can get involved with this sort of thing, because I think, oh gosh, it's really complicated. Just focus on the piece of the world that you really want to protect, and realize that there's an opportunity for us to make meaningful difference. And if we all do that on the piece of the world that we love and care about, then we'll be able to do this. And I think that what Colin and Ruth are trying to do is make that efficient in the way that, and that's what we're trying to do with this initiative here, is to create some structure. So good luck, and off you go, and let's all fix it. So thank you for allowing me to have that comment, Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for all the panel and all the questions today. I think it's a really exciting area, and let's bring it together and work together. There's a comment in the chat about reaching out to other farming organisations. That is being done, and it's about let's get the movement together and getting something delivered. So thank you very much for this morning. Thank you for all your participation and your presentations. Do engage. If you've got something you want to contribute towards this, do get in touch with either Jenny or myself, and we'll willingly want to take this forward further. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.